are Goblin Wolf Riders and Wolf Rider Archers, any good in patch 6.0.3. Now that we've been over Goblin Archers, it's fair to address these light skirmish cavalry, one melee and one ranged. They're cheap, they're fast, and they're not going to dish out the DPS that other units do, but they'll munch on artillery crews just fine. Let's take a good look and see what else they can do. Recruited for 300 gold and 75 upkeep, the basic Goblin Wolf Riders come in at 80 entities and 4,720 health on Ultra. The 80 entities is on par with Hound units. Armor is 25, with cavalry shields blocking 30% of small arms fire from the front, token solace. Leadership of 44 is very shaky, but speed 92 and charge speed 108 are really up there, a lot like Kislev dervishes. Melee attack begins at 22 and comes with an attack interval of 4.5, clearly slower than usual infantry. There is no splash damage. Melee defense of 22 isn't any better, obviously. Weapon strength 24 is split between base 19 and armor piercing 5, which is a better AP value than a foot goblin might have. Charge bonus is 20 and mass is 350 per entity, which is still enough, paired with a lack of knockdown animations, to clog up chariots and prevent them from hitting your massed infantry. The unit can hide in forest, has the expendable trait so goblins care if they're wiped out but not orcs or trolls, and have vanguard deployment for getting into rear areas a lot faster. The archer variant comes at 400 gold and 100 upkeep, which doesn't sound like much, but which is a third more than the other variant. Health of 4,560 per entity in an 80 entity unit is a little less. Armor is still 25, but no shields. Leadership is even more miserable at 38, melee attack of 15 is 7 worse with slightly faster attack interval of 4.3, no splash damage. Melee defense of 14 is 8 less, and that'll matter if they're out of ammo and must charge in. Weapon strength of 24 is the same for that part, but the split is worse. 21 base and 3 armor piercing like Goblin Archers had. Charge bonus is a mere 12 and mass is 350 again. Now, what do they have for bows? Ammunition 18 isn't the worst in the game. Range of 100 is sorta kinda okay considering it's a 360-degree firing whilst moving unit. Nominal missile damage is 14, but like the Goblin Archers, the per hit damage is 10 base and 1 armor piercing. Reload time is 8 seconds default, no worse than the Goblin Archers. Total accuracy of 20 is standard, calibration area 65 is fine considering the reduced range, but even within that range, calibration area is 4.1, so they are scattershot by nature even standing still. There is no multi-target penetration. Aside from the fire whilst moving I mentioned, the traits are the same as the other unit. In the redline skills, Ard as Nails applies to missile cavalry. At 3 pips you're getting range plus 10% and missile strength plus 8%, and that's applied to the combined damage, so you will go to base 11 and AP 1 from the damage ratio. Since it's a Goblin unit, at rank 7 Sneaky Stabbers grants leadership plus 5, weapon strength plus 12%, and physical resistance 10%. Of these, the last is most likely to be relevant. In the tech tree, more grub should apply to these as Goblin units for leadership plus 5 and upkeep minus 5%. Wolf Rider specific techs are Bouncin, which grants speed plus 10% and charge bonus plus 25%, and Wolf Pattern, offering plus 10 armor and physical resistance 5%, which are not at all trivial when considering the types of opponents they want to be engaging, enemy missile line units, and so on and so forth. For scrap upgrades, it's just a little complicated because Wolf Rider's base model benefits from Rusty Stabbers in the Skavn and Gits node, and the Archer's variant benefits from heavy ammo in the Scrap Arrows node. We went over the latter for Goblin Archers, providing plus 3 armor piercing for every single arrow that hits. Now this may have only 80 entities, but that's still a good 20 more than most missile skirmish cavalry gets at absolute best. Without waiting for technology unlocks, the Archer variant also gains access to ammo skin sacks, same as the Goblin Archers for plus 45% ammunition. Both Wolf Rider variants have access to Scrap Saddles, which offers armor plus 15 flat, and speed plus 15% percentile. Back to the regular riders, that Rusty Stabber Scrap option provides a plus 6 bonus versus infantry, and considering this is an 80 entity cavalry unit and wants to be slamming into infantry whenever possible, this is an upgrade you'd love to have. So how do we use the Goblin Wolf Riders? This isn't like the Horse Archers I covered for Kislev recently. The Archers variant is significantly nerfed in terms of melee, but in either case that's not your focus. The math of the charge bonus is that a rank 0 Wolf Rider base unit has melee attack 42 when it hits. That's okay, but it's not fantastic. For the archers, it's more like melee attack 27. At least they have a chance to do something when charging, but leaving them in melee is certain death or certain routing given the low leadership. So you either cycle charge them in and out, or you leave them to rot, which isn't ideal, or you hit a target so soft that they can actually deal with it as is. Thing is, they're riders in a world where things in their speed class are usually dogs of some sort, far flimsier usually. Melee defense 22 is actually really good compared to the misery direwolves deal with, 0 armor and 14 melee defense. The weapon strength is just scrappy enough to be viable. Basically, you want to use the unit aggressively, not a bit when a WA or other benefit makes them better, and move on. The superpower of this unit is its speed, not its hitting power, plus the fact you can control it unless it's broken, which isn't necessarily the case with, let's say, saber-tusked packs. Also, the armor upgrades weirdly turn it into a really high-speed, temporary tar pit unit, and that's just fine if your goal is to mob artillery crews and get them to stop firing, and so on. Now, the archers are a completely different ballgame. Their range isn't fantastic, but especially if you're spec'd into them, the Wolf Rider archers can deliver a lot of pain for far more mobility and therefore potential survivability than Goblin archers. Fighting fair is a bad idea, so fight perpetually unfair. You don't need to go all in with one type either. The regular riders can charge Dark Riders with crossbows or Outriders to make them turn and run, and the archers can potentially follow up by shooting them in the butts. But mainly it's about unfair battles against targets, and even if the target is not ideal, because even your lowliest melee cavalry probably has a 30% missile block chance, the other 70% is hitting relatively light armor, and 80 entities firing will hurt. This is an advantage over skeleton horse archers, let alone if you have heavy ammo in the mix. Bottom line, you would prefer to exhaust every single arrow before even thinking about melee, hopefully having accomplished something valuable with the effort. Even if the damage isn't huge, the distraction factor and kiting and pulling enemies out of position can be. This is the spirit with which you should approach the problem. Also, well, if other things fail, just let the lines engage, curve outward, and hit the enemy troops from behind somehow, be it the archer line or the shielded warrior line. Shields only block arrows from the frontal arc. The point is, damage is damage, and every point of damage done by an arrow is a point that doesn't have to be done by a club or an axe. It's the total that matters, not sticking to a single method. Everything counts. There's a limit to how much you can or should invest in what is ultimately a super fast, zippy, scrappy gobbo unit, but they're expendable for a reason. You will lose some. You just want to cause the enemy a lot of pain and aggravation in the process, and they're good at that. They annoy, and even if they're not the best in the business, they will aggressively chase down broken enemy forces and stab them in the back like Mork intended. What more can you ask? Well, you shouldn't ask too much of them. But like the tooltip says, hit them from all angles, and if the battle goes against you, be somewhere else. Seriously, in these demo combats, I switched opponents to use the charge bonus, rather than allow it to completely decay, and just leave the riders in melee where they don't belong. They are ultra light, but are still essentially shock cavalry. If their stats were any better, they'd be thoroughly overpowered, especially at these low prices. So remember the axiom, speed is life, and have at it. Take care and have fun harassing your enemies into frustration and hasty moves.